In the United States, there are 183 million active gamers, and the average young person in the United States will spend 10,000 hours gaming by the age of 21. Video games took in about $15.5 billion last year, and though a typical gamer plays for just an hour or two a day, there are now more than 5 million extreme gamers in the U.S. who play an average of 45 hours a week. To put this in perspective, the number of hours that gamers worldwide have spent playing World of Warcraft alone adds up to 5.93 million years. Most of what you hear about this phenomenon is doom and gloom. People becoming addicted, isolated, socially inept, that gaming is pulling them from productive work, fulfilling relationships, real life. But according to today's guest, game designer JANE McGONIGAL, the reason for this mass exodus to virtual worlds is that video games are increasingly fulfilling genuine human needs. But she goes way beyond that. In a TED Talk that I highly recommend, and in her first book, Reality is Broken, just out in paperback, she suggests that we can use the lessons of game design to fix what is wrong with the real world. And this is not merely a provocative declaration. McGonigal backs it up. Drawing on positive psychology, cognitive science, and sociology, she shows how game designers have hit on core truths about what makes us happy, so that video games consistently provide the exhilarating rewards, stimulating challenges, and epic victories that are so often lacking in the real world. I recommend Reality is Broken to people who may think they have no interest in games. Separate from what it says about the current reality and possible future of games, the book is an excellent primer on what we have learned, and what most people still don't know, about happiness, learning, productivity, growth. McGonigal roots her thinking and her work in some key understandings of how human beings use the principle of games, virtual and otherwise, to bring out their best and make life worth living. JANE McGonigal is the Director of Game Research and Development at the Institute for the Future. She has a Ph.D. from the University of California at Berkeley in Performance Studies and Games Research. She serves as the Creative Director for Social Chocolate, making games powered by the science of positive emotion and social connection. McGonigal specializes in games that challenge players to tackle real-world problems such as poverty, hunger, climate change, through planetary scale collaboration. Business Week called her one of the 10 most important innovators to watch. Fast Company named her one of the 100 most creative people in business. Oprah Magazine, one of the 20 most inspiring women in the world. New York Times, 10 breakthrough ideas in science. MIT Technology Review, top 35 innovators changing the world through technology. Harvard Business Review, top 20 breakthrough ideas. And that TED Talk I mentioned, which you can find all the TED Talks at TED.com, is ranked number 16 all-time most engaging. Her first book, just out in paperback, as I said, is Reality is Broken, Why Games Make Us Better and How They Can Change the World. She believes game designers are on a humanitarian mission, and her number one goal in life is to see a game designer win a Nobel Peace Prize. Welcome, JANE McGonigal.
Thank you.
I like listeners to get to know the people behind the work and the ideas that we talk about. So briefly, what is your personal path to the work that you do today? And feel free to cite mentors, turning points, moments of decision. And let me also say, as I was driving over here, I was thinking, I see 4 strands in what I read about you and your work: Buddhism, games, positive psychology, and entrepreneurism.
Interesting. That's a pretty good breakdown. Yeah, I like it. So, what I think about what I do, first and foremost, is trying to help people unleash their, real life superpowers to really bring out the best in them and achieve epic wins in their real lives, kind of lead extraordinary lives, be of extraordinary service to other people. That's what I think about. And so you're absolutely right to identify a lot of the influences there, because it sort of does sum it up. And I think my background, actually, I have a background in theater and recreation. I used to work with the New York City Department of Parks and Recreation. So a lot of where I come to games does come from the sort of world of play, theater as play, and these real world recreation where we come together and play in real spaces, and that play is sort of part of building a neighborhood or building a community in the city. So that's sort of background on play has been a big part of how I think, the way that play can serve a community, or that play can serve to bring people together for an experience together in the real world.
It's interesting because that isn't something I'd read about, and yet it makes very good sense to me. Because as I said, as I looked at your thoughts about, you begin the book by defining what a game is, and I thought, well, that isn't just video games, that's games.
Yes, absolutely. I mean, to me, it's important that we put video games in the context of human history, and the fact that we've been playing games for literally as long as we've been human. There's no civilization that we have a record of that doesn't have games. And for folks who feel kind of alienated from the world of video gaming, or they have gamers in their lives, loved ones who game, that they just don't understand, to at least start to provide that context to understand that gaming is fundamentally a part of being human. Some would say, as I talk about in the book, this ability to come together and play by artificial rules is something that no other species does. And there's a great philosopher, Johann Helsinga, who said, we are never more human than when we play. I think that's an important thing to keep in perspective, that video games are part of that tradition and part of that legacy.
Yeah, I have a feeling that you're right. For a lot of people, certainly people who don't play games or who, consider themselves Luddites or whatever, I think when they think of video game or computer game or virtual game, their accent is on the video, the virtual, or the computer. And
right.
What you're saying is that that's a medium that allows for a lot of what the potential you see is allowed for by that medium, but that at its root, this is people playing games.
Right, exactly. There's a fundamental psychology that underlies gaming that the medium of computer and video games has taken to a new level, and that on top of that, the network effects as you get people playing multiplayer or social network games or massively multiplayer games for the first time in human history, we can have millions of people playing the same game at the same time. That starts to take what has been, traditionally part of who we are and take it to a new level. And, in my perspective, the same way that, agriculture took humanity to the next level, or the design of roads connecting cities, or even the design of cities took humanity to newer levels of cooperation and working together, to see games, networked games, as one of those technologies that brings us together in a way that hasn't happened before.
And how do you compare what you're talking about with what happens in sports, for instance?
Well, it's interesting, and it's in many ways very similar. The reason why we play sports as individuals or, with teams is, I think, to find out what we're capable of, for that same desire to be engaged in something that's difficult for us, for that same pleasure of getting better at something, of mastering a new skill, that drive for self-improvement, that drive for mastery, and that drive to just challenge ourselves. And you go out for a game, you go out for a competition to really see what you're made of that day. That's really the same underlying psychology for folks who are into computer and video games. You want to sit down and master a new skill, or you want to tap into, the best effort that you can make and see what you're capable of and see how it shakes out against other people's best efforts.
Yeah, and I'm someone who doesn't play video games. I've done my little bit of Rock Band and my little bit of Wii, but not really. But sports for me were always a source not just of mastery, but of those other things, of connection, of flow, of being in the moment. I mean, when I started reading what you were suggesting people experience, I went, well, I know many of those experiences from the experience of showing up at a basketball court with no one having never been there. Perhaps you're even traveling, and within 5 minutes you've accepted, as you point out, and I'm going to let you do that next, the principles, but you've accepted voluntary goals, voluntary rules, voluntary teammates, and you go from there. And in that moment, I feel I'm as alive as I am doing anything.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, one of the early bits of research that really inspired my thinking was Mihaly Csikszentmihalyi's original work on the theory of flow, or this kind of peak experience where you're engaged with something that's challenging for yourself. That first academic study he did, Beyond Boredom and Anxiety, he identified a few things that really seemed to provide it regularly. One was sports. One was dancing, and the other was gameplay.
Right.
And those they all clearly have in common, this idea that they provide a structure for people to come together and to immerse themselves in a challenge.
Okay, so those principles that you put up early in the book that define a game.
Yes. So shall we go through the principles?
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay. The first one is, well, let's just do the basic definition. I mean, for me, the basic definition of a game is that it's a voluntary obstacle, an unnecessary challenge that you are volunteering to engage with. That's the basic premise, that you're going to agree to try something that's hard for you, that you're not sure if it can be done or how it can be done or how you're going to try to do it, but you agree to give it your best effort and see what happens as a result. And so when you break that down, first you do have a goal. The game has to give you a sort of arbitrary thing that you're going to try to achieve, whether it's get the ball in the basket, by standing a certain distance away, or, to make words out of tiles on a Scrabble screen, right? And then it gives you restrictions on how you can achieve that goal. You can't run while you're holding the ball. You can't have as many letters as you like. You can only have 7 at a time, right? So things that kind of unlock creativity or require strategy that make it harder to achieve this goal than it would normally be if you were just doing it the most efficient way possible.
Right. So if I may, voluntary goals and voluntary obstacles.
Yes.
Yep.
And then you have a feedback system, because it's really important that you have an idea of if you're getting close to achieving your goal or not, if what your strategy you're trying is better or worse than the last strategy you tried, just so you can get a sense of where are you going to win, or how can you win? So that can be a point system, that could be in a digital game. It's just the way that the game provides feedback for every action that you take, really synchronously with your actions. So you need to know if you're getting closer to the goal. And then the last part of it is simply that it is indeed voluntary, that you can stop at any time, that if you're playing of your own free will. It's your self-motivated engagement that's really key. It's why we can't just make people play games and say, if games are so good for you, just make everybody play this game. If you haven't volunteered for it, then you lose that really powerful element of psychology, which is that sort of positive stress that we get when we choose to tackle a challenge. If you haven't chosen it, if you're being forced to do it, or you're doing it kind of against your will, then you're going to have all the same resentment that you would have towards real work, or the same anxiety or stress that you would about real work.
Okay, Jane McGonigal, author of Reality is Broken. I mean, as I said, I really loved this part. One of the things that I hear is that this is the same stuff, as I say, when I first looked into flow myself. Flow, if, as I put it, is the conditions that promote flow are clear goals, readily available, consistent feedback, and a stretch, the right stretch between skill and challenge. And it seems to me that that's very much what we're talking about here as well.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I mean, you in order to really get the benefit of games, which we're seeing that one of the big benefits of games is that it increases your resilience in the face of challenge. So the way that games keep you on that edge of your ability means that you're always working hard. You're always trying to get the peak effort out of yourself. And that seems to increase your ability to stay engaged with difficult challenges in your real life longer, that you have this kind of resilience in the face of failure, or this ability to stay at that level of concentration and motivation for longer periods of time. And that really does require you to be on the edge of your ability, which computer and video games in particular are so good at keeping you at because of how they constantly adjust and modulate to be just hard enough for you to barely keep going.
Right. And what I want, one thing you said was that, resilience in games seems to help us resilience in other aspects of our life. When you say that, and I just want to emphasize this for listeners, you're not just saying it seems that way. What you're saying is almost every assertion you make is based on a lot of scientific research.
Right. I mean, I'm very fortunate. I think actually we're all very fortunate that there are hundreds of laboratories and scientific departments around the world that are pouring a lot of time and energy into trying to understand exactly how games are affecting us. So you can go everywhere from, Stanford to Berkeley to Harvard to NYU and find these studies, these research studies that are looking at long-term impacts of gaming. And so I've had the fun, for the last 10 years of collecting all this data, doing meta-analysis of the data, and looking for the patterns and looking for what seems to be validated, one study to the next. And yeah, it is turning out to be this kind of psychological resilience is one of the things that shows up in study after study.
And one thing that I hear is, 10 years ago you start looking at this. When you first started with the way you were approaching looking at games, were you pretty much alone? Was it a small group of people that you kind of went, well, are you thinking about that? Are you thinking about that? Because your book is the first book, I think, that really pulls it all together. But this world has grown a great deal in the time you've been in it.
Yeah, indeed. When I first started, I think it's fair to say that I was out on a limb. If not entirely by myself, there were so few people that I didn't see any of them.
Right.
And when I started, I was in graduate school at Berkeley, as you said, and I started submitting, scientific papers, academic papers, get accepted at conferences and go give talks. And, everybody's reaction was sufficiently curious that it motivated me to keep going. But yeah, there's a lot of skepticism, and that's not to say there isn't skepticism now, but I mean, early on, in fact, the thing that I heard more than anything else, we'll see how this reference rings with you, was the idea of Ender's Game, the science fiction book in which all these poor gamers are being used and abused by the government to wage war. They couldn't tell the difference between games and reality. That was what I heard everywhere I went. Wait, so are you talking about building an Ender's Game? That's going to, destroy the world.
Yeah.
We're all going to be puppets for the military. Now people understand, I think, a little bit better that, the games that we play are tools not for other, agents to use us and abuse us, but that these games are tools for us to develop whatever skills and abilities really matter to us. They're tools for us to build the best versions of ourselves.
And that's the voice of JANE McGONIGAL. She's Director of Game Research and Development at the Institute for the Future, and her first book is just out in paperback, Reality is Broken, Why Games Make Us Better and How They Can Change the World. And you can learn more at janemcgonigal.com. When I first interviewed Mihai Csikszentmihalyi, which was, I think, 1998, I asked him, so who's taking advantage of this? This makes so much sense. How can we bring more of the flow that you've discovered in rock climbing or dancing or sports and games into our real lives? And he said, actually, that the military was one of the first organizations that saw value in this. Now, what's interesting is his first papers, if I'm not mistaken, were published in 1972. Nearly 40 years ago. And it's my experience from the research that I've done that the gaming industry, the electronic gaming industry, is the industry that has most taken advantage of what he's told us.
Mm-hmm. Well, absolutely true. I mean, his book Flow is like the Bible of game design. I mean, that's like the one thing that everybody has read. And I think maybe that's something that people who don't pay attention to game culture might not be aware of, is just how seriously game designers do take scientific research, particularly around psychology. Just how many game companies have people in the company whose job it is to follow the research and to try to implement it so that all of this positive psychology is actually helping the players have a more positive experience. I mean, I like to say that, game designers are essentially happiness engineers. It's the only thing they really care about is making the player feel these positive emotions, because that's why we play games. It's the business that we're in.
Right. In other words, and one could say, well, what's underneath that? And, of course, the game will, we assume, sell better, be played more often, be recommended to friends more often, et cetera, if it delivers. And I think it's just very interesting, and you've mentioned it, but that in game design, if one goes back to those three things I mentioned, which were clear goals, ready, consistent feedback, and stretch, very few things in life can control that as much, can operationally take those principles and the criteria and apply them as game design. And could you talk just a little bit about that?
That's the thing that we struggle with when we try to bring game design principles to reality, is how difficult it is to control, particularly two aspects of it. The stretch, meaning it's constantly adjusting to be harder, and the sense that it's kind of a safe place, that the stakes are low enough that you can stretch yourself, and if you fail, nobody's going to die. I mean, I think that's when I talk to people about making games that can save the real world, if you're a skeptic, the first thing you're going to say to me is, but in games and you die, nothing happens and doesn't matter. In the real world, somebody dies and they're really dead. Like, that's the big conceptual leap that people sort of have trouble making. And I think that's where the biggest need for creativity and skill design comes in. So I could give you an example. I mean, we're sort of talking abstractly about what I do and I'm excited about. I'm really obsessed with this game that I did not work on, but that I play, called Fold It, which I do write about in the book. Fold it like, folding your laundry.
Right. And I have a feeling where you're going, but folks, listen to this one, because this is a real-world demonstration of what we're talking about.
Yeah, so game created by scientists at the University of Washington with the help of some programmers from a game development company called Bungie, which makes some of the greatest, most epic video games in the world. So top-notch scientists, top-notch game programmers. They wanted to make a game where gamers could be taught to do real medical research. Now, if you're scared of the idea of games touching reality, you might say, I don't want gamers touching medical research. They're not trained. People could get sick and die. But what they've done is they've created a virtual environment where gamers can learn how to manipulate virtual proteins. So, right, everything that happens in the human body happens from proteins that fold and unfold in different configurations. And if they fold up in unstable configurations, we get diseases like Alzheimer's or cancer. So one thing that scientists have been doing for a while now is trying to figure out how to fold proteins in the human body up into more stable configurations to prevent disease, or how to refold them with medicine to stop the unfolding from happening. So they've made this world where gamers can learn how to manipulate these proteins without really understanding a lot of the science. They're taking advantage of gamers' ability to manipulate objects in 3D space. So, like, think of Tetris, for example, and how you manipulate objects in space to fit together that way. This game is really a lot like Tetris, although more complicated. Instead of 4 shapes, you've got dozens of shapes. And what they've done is they've created this safe space for people who don't really know the science to play with the science, and the players have gotten so good at it that they've been able to give them questions or challenges that scientists have been unable to figure out. And the players earlier this fall actually solved a long-standing scientific question. Scientists have been trying to figure out if you were to use protein folding to stop the HIV virus from replicating in the body, how would that work? Scientists have been working on it for 10 years.
Right.
The gamers did it in 10 days after they got the problem, came up with a solution, No scientist had ever done it. These are untrained. These are not people with PhDs in molecular biology. These are just ordinary gamers. And that's when you start to hear terms like Nobel Prize being thrown around, that these gamers get a Nobel Prize in medicine just for playing a game. And what I like about that example is it shows you how you can take a really high-stakes challenge like AIDS or cancer and give it to gamers in a way where they are mastering a new skill, they're stretching, they're collaborating, they're immersed in this flow, but also that they're doing something, that really matters.
Yeah. One of the things, by the way, we've mentioned this stretch a few times, and it seems like what we're usually talking about is making it harder and harder and harder. The point, when I said the appropriate stretch, folks, is that, you know this from your own life, when something is too much of a stretch, and you fail too much, you can get frustrated. When something is not enough of a stretch, you get bored. And so there's a sweet spot that we're looking for here, and it's what seems to bring out flow in people, and it's what, as we've pointed out, the game industry can program into their games in a way that is very hard to replicate in reality. You point out in your TED Talk that if we take Malcolm Gladwell's notion of 10,000 hours to achieve mastery, that there are, 500,000 people in the world who are virtuosos, who are masters of something, and then you ask yourself, what is that something that they're virtuosos at? Is my numbers correct?
500 million.
Oh, I was only off by the order of 1,000. Okay, let's just get that. In other words, if I said there were 500,000 people, it sounded like a lot. 500 million people who are extraordinarily good at something because they have spent 10,000 hours doing it, playing these games. And then your question, which I love, was, what is it that they're virtuosos at? And tell us about that.
Yeah, exactly. So we know that if you spend 10,000 hours working at the edge of your ability, that you become a virtuoso, right? That's research that Malcolm Gladwell recently picked up, but it's been studied for a number of decades. And games are always keeping you at the edge of your ability. So we know that games have made you a virtuoso of something. And a lot of the research I was doing at the Institute for the Future, which is where I went after UC Berkeley, was to look into trying to figure out what those kind of superpowers that gamers were developing are. And so I came up with 4 of them that seem to cut across almost any genre of these computer video games. One is, what we call urgent optimism. It's having this kind of radar for opportunities to rise to the occasion, that you're kind of constantly scanning for the next quest or the next mission so that you can volunteer and tackle it. And that's a pretty interesting skill, right? Somebody who's always ready to help if you can just get their attention, Then you have this kind of blissful productivity, which is that ability we talked about, that resilience to stay engaged with something for a long time, even if it's hard for you. And gamers are really good at looking for sources of feedback so that they can feel like they are making progress, so that they can stay engaged. One of the things that I've found so interesting in the scientific literature is that for many young people who've been diagnosed with attention deficit hyperactivity disorder, the symptoms disappear when they're playing one of their favorite video games. This has sort of led to a lot of controversy. There's a New York Times editorial about this research saying, well, it's not that the symptoms have gone away because the real world isn't that engaging. So the video games, it's not like they're, cured in the video games, because they still have to go out and be in the real world, which unfortunately can't motivate and engage them as effectively. And that makes me crazy, because I think, shouldn't we fix the real world then instead of saying that they have a disease? Shouldn't we just try and, But anyway, so that's one of the superpowers. And then the other 2 are social fabric, this ability to feel like you're a part of a community where everybody shares certain values, certain goals, and that everybody in the community has a chance to contribute based on whatever their strength is. Massively multiplayer online games are really great place to see this in action, because you have your own avatar that will have specialized in a certain skill or certain power, and you contribute to the larger group using that skill or power, and everybody gets a chance to add, the one thing that they do best. The last is a sense of epic meaning, just really seeing that bigger purpose to your actions, that heroic story, that journey that you're on, or that purpose that you're fulfilling that is bigger than just yourself, and being, wanting to attach yourself to that kind of meaning and being able to respond to these kind of epic narratives that will keep you working hard and committed to your challenge and collaborating with others would be the other thing that these gamers are virtuosos at.
It's just wonderful. And I'm going to go through them again. I also I appreciate your word choices as well. Urgent optimism, blissful productivity, and the third is the social fabric. Social fabric, and the fourth is epic meaning. Now, obviously, and I really appreciated also your tangent in there in which you said, if the problem is that real life is not engaging enough, real life does not test us enough, real life does not give us enough feedback, real life does not reward us enough with a feeling that we matter, then the problem, task one, job one would be how do we rejigger real life so that it can begin to do those things? You have taken this and you have run with it. It isn't just that you've done the study and you've written the book, but you have actually this notion that you have, this challenge that you sort of lay out, which is, can we use games to solve real problems? And you told us about the example of Fold It. But you've done some others, Evoke, World Without Oil, and so on. Talk a little bit about that, if you would.
Sure. I mean, one of my favorite projects that I've done was just this past year. It's actually not in the book, so maybe it will be new to you too, which is fun. It was for the New York Public Library.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, and they were looking for a game that could get young people excited about libraries, specifically the physical space of a library, because young people today, we do all our research on the internet, we never come to the actual building, it's all Wikipedia. And so they asked me if I thought I could make a game that would get young people into the library and excited about the library and feel like they had a community there. So I thought about, what do young people want and how can the library help them achieve that? Because I really feel passionately that games should be giving people an opportunity to achieve dreams they already have or goals that already matter to them. I don't want to tell people what their goals should be, right?
Well, it's that whole thing you said. It's really a game if it's voluntary, if we choose it. And one of the keys there, I'm just going to throw in here, is that one of the big things positive psychology talks about is extrinsic motivation, intrinsic motivation, extrinsic rewards, intrinsic rewards. Intrinsic rewards are those where the activity is a reward in itself, where you chose it and it rewards you in itself. And that's going to be much more likely to happen if you chose it.
Exactly. So, what do young people want that has anything to do with the library? Well, a lot of young people want to write books, right? They want to be authors. It's one of the most common life goals that we hear from people, under 35. And so I thought, wouldn't it be great to make a game where if you played the game, at the end of the game, you have actually written a book, not learned to write a book, but you have written a book, and then that book could go in the library, and you could be a published author with a book in the library, and then you could, bring your friends over and say, here's my book, and, come back with your kids and your grandkids and be like, here's the book that I wrote for the New York Public Library. So we actually made a game where that's exactly what happens, and anyone can play it from anywhere in the world. If you want to write a book and bring it to your library, it's a game you can play anywhere. It's called Find the Future. If you want to write a book by playing a game, but we thought we'd kick it off in a really fun way. We invited 500 people to play the game together for the first time. We locked them into the main branch of the library overnight. So the same building where Ghostbusters was filmed. That's a good visual for people. 6 p.m. to 6 a.m. Locked the doors. Nobody was allowed out till they wrote a book, and they actually played the game, overnight. We had a bookbinder on the premises, so as they were completing each writing quest, they were printing out the pages. They were getting sewn by hand together into this beautiful, classically bound book. And 6 a.m., the end of the night, they all lined up, hand-signed the book. The New York Public Library put it into its rare books collection, said they would defend this book for as long as New York City is standing, and now their names are in the card catalog as published authors with the library. It's pretty cool to see how you can take somebody who's always wanted to write a book, and then give them that achievement in one night in a way that is really meaningful. I mean, to have a book in the Rare Books collection, that has the Gutenberg Bible, has the hand written Declaration of Independence, that's a pretty cool epic win. So I like to think that games can take things that are hard for us or goals that we might not be able to achieve on our own and give us the opportunity to really do it.
And one thing I want to question and point out about that is that it wasn't merely, okay, write a book by 6 a.m. What you did was you structured it with quests and levels and things like that so that it wasn't one big thing. It was a number of steps, correct?
Exactly. We had 100 quests, and each quest was inspired by an object in the library. So, for example, the handwritten Declaration of Independence. You had to go on this hunt to find the object. You would find the object, we'd tell you cool things about it, and then that would unlock a writing quest. So that quest that was unlocked was to make your own declaration. What would you want to stand up and declare as passionately as Thomas Jefferson declared all those years ago? And then you had to get 56 people to sign it, just the way he had 56 people sign their John Hancocks for the original Declaration. And that becomes one chapter in the book. When you have all 100 chapters, you've actually written a book. It's called 100 Ways to Make History. And it's basically your best 100 ideas for what we should be doing to change the world, to make history, to reinvent the future. So we help you. We help you write the book. Yeah.
And so what we're talking about there is that it breaks things down into chunks of quests and things the same way that games do and releases this enormous amount of creativity. That's the voice of Jane McGonigal. We're talking about the work she does and the book that's just out in paperback, Reality is Broken. Another real-world example is the game you invented to help yourself when you suffered post-concussion syndrome.
Yeah, and this is actually the project that I'm spending most of my time on now. It started more than a couple years ago. I had a concussion. It did not heal properly, and I was kind of stuck in this post-concussion state where I couldn't really read or write. I couldn't, be that physically active. I had horrible headaches and nausea and was really just depressed and anxious. And I was in the middle of writing my book. I had to stop writing it, obviously. But, I was really immersed in these ideas, and I thought to myself, this is probably the lowest I've ever been. I should really see if a game can get me out of this state, because everything that I've been, looking at in my research, the games provoke the positive emotions. The games connect us with meaning and purpose. They help us be more resilient. I thought surely if I could turn this into a game, I could actually survive it. So I did that. I invented this kind of role-playing adventure game for myself. I originally called it Jane the Concussion Slayer, and I invited my friends and family to play with me, which was really important because I was kind of having a hard time explaining to them, just how severe the symptoms were and how it was impacting my life. And it was kind of hard to get on the phone with somebody and say, by the way, I'm completely miserable and I want to die.
Right.
Can you help me?
hard for you as much as for them. That's what you're saying. Yeah.
Exactly.
As we all know.
Yeah, but I could say, hey, I'm going to play a game to heal my brain, and I have a special role for you to play in the game. Will you play with me? And that kind of opened it up,
Sure.
So we played this game, and, it involved my friends and family giving me quests to go on, something as simple as, instead of lying in bed all day, why don't you sit by the window all day and at least enjoy the view? It's like the first thing to take me out, of where I was, and to start checking in on me every day to see how I was doing with my quests and give me achievements and help me stay positive. Well, anyway, it worked so well for me that I posted the rules online, and I started to hear from people all over the world. I'm playing this because I'm having knee surgery. I'm playing this because I'm taking chemotherapy. I'm playing this because I want to quit smoking. And you could actually go online and see people playing it on their blogs and playing it on Facebook. And I was just so sort of taken with how much help it seemed to be that I decided that we should do it for real, like actually make a real online game that would structure this and help people who might not be creative enough to kind of roll their own version, so to speak, to actually play. So we're in March, the first week of March, we're going to launch the game. We've been doing clinical trials with Ohio State University Medical Research Center. We've been doing a closed beta for the last 6 months, and it's pretty exciting, for me personally, something that represented maybe the worst thing that ever happened to me, to get to somewhere where it can be one of the best things I've ever done.
Yeah, no, I love that story. I mean, it really is gamer heal thyself, isn't it?
Yes, exactly.
Well, and I mean that not just to be glib, but there you were in sort of taken out of all this productive work you'd been doing and this wonderful research, and it's clear that you're inspired by what you're doing and so on, and suddenly waylaid to where you couldn't do and be who you were. And then I totally applaud you for whatever that moment was when the light bulb went on and you said, well, but maybe I can.
Yeah, exactly. And I think if nothing else, I really do think it is that is the resilient kind of thinking of a gamer. Like when all is lost, there must be something. There is some key I haven't found, some secret door that I just have to keep looking for. That is a very gamer kind of resilience.
Well, as you point out, gamers, the ones who play intensely for hours and hours, fail most of the time.
Yes, exactly.
And yet something in the nature of gaming keeps them coming back to it. I remember years and years ago, I imagined that in a future of decreasing resources and decreasing places to dispose of waste and rising population, one thing that might save us would be if we began to depend more on experiences than stuff, right? And so I know one of your in the book you basically we've mentioned in the interview that why not fix reality, and you actually lay out, I think it's 14 ways that reality could stand to be fixed, and one of them you point out is that games are sustainable, reality isn't. Talk a little bit about this future.
Yeah, I mean you're speaking to my heart here, because I think this is one of the most underappreciated aspects of gaming that I do try to pull out a little bit in the book, although you could probably write a whole book just about this.
Absolutely.
Yeah, it's just, gamers are not, by and large, acquiring stuff. They have kind of opted out of this materialistic culture, right? Because the games are, there is no material there, right? It's all about skill acquisition. It's all about social interaction. It's all about firsthand experience, live experience, that does not, by and large, require a great amount of production or resources. And that is pretty interesting. When people look at gamers and say they're wasting their time, why aren't they doing something real? That's not going to help them get a better job. That's not going to help them get ahead, in life. I think it's pretty provocative when you realize that if you can get all of these things that we crave most, better social relationships, the ability to learn new things and get good at new things and to feel that flow that we crave more than anything else, if we can get that out of games, then maybe we don't need to get on that whole hedonic treadmill where we have to work 60-hour weeks so that we can earn a ton of money and spend it on the status objects and convince ourselves that we're happy and convince ourselves that we're successful. If we can have that experience in games and experience success and happiness and community and meaning, in this way that's so much more sustainable and kind of bypasses all of the BS that we've told ourselves is necessary to be happy, certainly in America. It's pretty subversive, and but I think that's what's happening.
Yeah, I was going to say, obviously, there's the conversation right now about the 99% and the 1%. And, one of the big things would be that the 99% would say, how do we opt out and get our satisfaction opting out of the world of material accumulation and Wall Street? And obviously, although you may be very hot to get the game the day it comes out, that material possession, what you will do with it on your own in the future is, as we say, ultimately sustainable.
Yes, absolutely. Yeah. And just even at a pure economic level, people talk a lot about the value you get, the sort of hours of engagement that you get just out of buying a game versus other things like books or movies or music. And it's pretty amazing. Games, are designed to be replayable. They're oftentimes designed now with a creativity tool inside them so that once you play the game, you can reinvent it. You can make your own levels. You can redesign the game for your friends, learn how to create new worlds within the game.
So that once you've mastered it, it still has a challenge left.
Yeah, and the challenge is creation instead of consumption. And that's very different from any other kind of entertainment product that we consume, that it can put you right from consumption into the mode of
Well, as
creation.
you point out, many of the most popular games today, if I'm reading you correctly, don't have a manual that tells you this is how it works. You have to do very often you have to discover. I mean, Portal is that way, right?
Yeah, one of my favorite games. I mean, a lot of games, they technically might have a manual, but the producers know nobody reads them, so they don't really put a lot of effort into them anymore. Yeah. No, it is. You get put in this world, and your first job is to figure out, how does the world work? What am I supposed to do here? What's my goal? And what does it all mean? So it's very different from traditional games where if you give me a checkerboard and you want me to play checkers with you, you have to explain to me how it works. We can't just start playing and I learn as we go. So it is really this very different sense of self-discovery, self-exploration, and it requires, a lot of intelligent attention in those early stages of the game. You almost never work harder than in the first few minutes of the game as you're trying to figure out what's going on. Yeah.
Right. One thing that we've heard over and over again, but I bet is still a question to a lot of listeners, is we're talking about how games also build social cohesion. There's a social, and I bet a lot of people think of a single kid in a room with a computer. Where does all this sociability come out? How does it happen?
Yeah, and I don't blame people who still have the stereotype of the single person in front of their screen playing alone, because it was like that for a little while. I mean, if you're talking about gaming in the 80s and 90s, there was a lot of solitary gameplay. But then games went online, and games became more and more multiplayer, and then they became massively multiplayer, and they became networked and team-based. And if you look at and not to mention social network now, if you look at the hours spent gaming on the planet, the majority of them right now are spent playing with people we know in real life. So that's not even just, playing with people on the internet. This is playing with people we have real-life relationships, real face-to-face relationships with, whether that's playing a game like Farmville or Words with Friends on our phone, or playing Call of Duty, with our friends. We're on the same team. We might not be in the same living room, but we're playing together online. Which are games like, Rock Band and the Wii games. We're all in the same living room, all in the same space playing. That's the majority of gameplay. And what's interesting on top of that is that cooperative gameplay is outperforming competitive now on a rate of 3-to-1. People are preferring to play games where they're on the same side as the other players.
Oh, I love this.
Yeah. So even if you were imagining people playing together, but they're trying to beat each other and they're trying to kill each other's avatars, what you have now more often than not is let's work together, let's get this, together, and it's a totally different social interaction than trying to compete with somebody. So that evolution has dramatically changed what's going on in terms of the social engagement, which helps make it possible now for us to really get more trust when we play with each other, more respect for each other, more bonding, that we're more likely to help each other in real life after we play these co-op games together. I mean, that's another area of the research that has been fascinating to follow. Playing these cooperative games with friends and family makes us more cooperative in real life.
Yeah, and as again, if I go back to my sports experience, sports are about at the same moment in team sports, intense competition, intense cooperation. And I think a player who's at all aware knows that there's even cooperation between the competing teams. It takes a great team to bring out your best.
Yes, and you have to, agree to hang. So, for example, if a team quits in the middle of the game because they're losing, right, you have to trust that the other team is going to stay in it. You have to trust that everybody is going to, value and honor the outcome. So, yeah, absolutely. That's something that even with competitive games that you are building trust if you get to the end of the game successfully together.
Yeah, I keep thinking, I'm not sure what the question is, but I keep thinking of Robert Wright's book, Non-Zero.
Yes, huge influence on me. If you wanted to go back to your first question about big ideas that influenced me, I read that the year before I started graduate school.
Oh, perfect.
And that was a huge influence.
No, I love Robert's work, whatever he's doing.
Mm-hmm.
But that in Non-Zero, he says, we think that we're more and more warlike, where in fact we are more and more cooperative. And I highly recommend anyone who missed that book, Non-Zero by Robert Wright. Okay, 2 last questions. Another one of my old musings was that what if we could create a technology or a media or an artistic expression or some combination of all of those that carried a sense of quality no matter the content, right? That somehow, I was just sort of musing, how could the creative among us actually save us from our worst impulses? And it seems that there's something to that in here. In other words, that's a question I raised to myself, 40 years ago. But in here, it's in that the content, I said quality, but the content here is, it's that stretch. It's pursuing goals. It's finding your best. It's cooperating. Is there something going on here where we're actually, through this process, maybe able to, what I was looking at was something that could go around the commodification of everything we do. Mm-hmm. Do you know? That it would be on some level so essentially true and have an essential integrity that you couldn't commodify it and destroy it as so many other things, have been done.
I love that idea. I love it. It's, I mean, as with every other art form and medium, it would certainly be a challenge given what a big industry gaming is, right? To figure out a way to have that pure of an expression. But, you look at festivals, you look at things like Burning Man, you look at the new forms of theater in New York City that are heavily influenced by game design. I don't know if you're familiar with Punch Drunk's production of Sleep No More that's in New York now. It's like they take over a whole building and every scene's in a different room and you have to piece together the play by wandering around.
Oh, yes, I have heard of that.
Yeah, and there are lots of interesting ways that I think games are leaking out into other festivals and theater, and that I think does provide a lot of hope there. The famous game designer Will Wright, he made The Sims. He said recently that games are undergoing a Cambrian explosion. Referencing that time in evolution where suddenly we went from however many strands of life to massively many more species, huge experimentation, everything getting different and evolving so much more quickly. That's kind of where it feels like we are with games now. Massive experimentation, massively many more forms and genres, and maybe one of those species will come to be what you are describing.
Yeah.
If you're lucky.
Yeah. Oh, very exciting. The final question I was going to ask, we've only got 1 minute, so you may not be able to answer it. It's one that I have asked other people, and almost no one can answer it, which is that if you could stand in the future, if you could stand at 2050 and ask yourself if humanity turned things around, and the answer was yes, how did they do it?
Well, I will tell you how they did it, and it will seem like an aside, but bear with me. I'm a big believer in the movement to take back our time. I don't know if you are familiar with it.
Oh, absolutely. John McGrath and those folks, yes.
Absolutely. So the idea that we are working too much, the New Economics Foundation just put out this amazing report on the 21-hour work week.
Yes.
They want to move the whole planet to a 21-hour work week for more sustainability, for more equitable employment, so we have more time to spend with our family and friends and doing things that matter intrinsically to us, and to move to a less materialistic, consumption-oriented society. I believe that is how we would turn it around, and I think gamers are showing us the way to that already because of how much they value this thing that has no extrinsic value, that doesn't help them necessarily get ahead in the workplace, but that they can spend these hours doing this thing that provides all of these intrinsic rewards. And there's something there with the time that we make for ourselves to play and lessening our sort of obsession with this formalized 40-hour work week, I think right in there, that's how
when we look
around.
back, we'll say, when that started happening, we'd at least come to a fork in the road, and we were headed in the right direction. Jane McGonigal's book, just out in paperback, is Reality is Broken, Why Games Make Us Better and How They Can Change the World. Her website is JaneMcGonigal.com. That's Jane, McGonigal. As an introduction, I highly recommend her TED Talk, which you can find at TED.com. You can listen to this week's conversation and many others anytime during the week by linking to the podcast or having it delivered to you. You can do that at my website, TerenceMcNally.net, or aworldthatjustmightwork.com, same website, or at iTunes. You can sign up at iTunes or at my site to have it delivered. You can also sign up at my site or by emailing me at temcnally, TEMCNALLY, at mac.com to get a weekly announcement telling you who's going to be on, what we're going to talk about. Finally, thank you to Jane McGonigal. Keep up the good work and the good play.
Thank you, Terence.